Hi there, this is CSProfessorPam with Jumpstart Code. We have been working on decisions, or if statements, in JavaScript, and we've been working on a little game called Guess the Number, where we have an input box here. A random number has been selected, and I enter a guess, and it will tell me if I'm too low, too high, or correct. So this is too low, so let's go higher. And it's somewhere in between 56. Right, it was less than 60. There you go, right? So let's take a look at the code and see what we have right now. Right now we have code that, first of all, chooses a random number. And in previous videos, we've explained the math of how we've used the math.random function and the math.floor function to select this random number. We have a function that is executed when we click the button, and that function figures out what message to display. So we have a variable for the message. We get the number that the user has guessed from the input box. We check whether it's equal to the number that was picked. If so, the message is correct. If it's less than the number, the message is too low. If it's otherwise, it must be greater than, the message is too high. And here's where we display the message. But we want to add something to this game. I want to limit the number of tries that you have to guess this number. Let's say you get, so I've created a few variables here, again at the very beginning of my program. I've got a constant called max tries. I'll be able to modify this if I want to make the game harder or easier. Right now I'll set it at 10. I have a counter so that I can count every time I make a guess and it's incorrect. I need to keep a counter of that so that we know when the game is over. The game is over when either you guess the number correctly or you run out of tries. We are not going to use this variable. I'm going to delete it, and I'm going to explain this variable in just a second. All right, so when we check for a guess, when we check a guess, all of this is staying the same, but what we need to do after we have determined what whether it's been guessed or not, we need to increment the counter, right? Because every time I guess, I want to keep track of that's another guess. So I need to increment my counter. Again, notice I think about what I want to do first and write a comment to think through the logic, and then I'm going to do that. Now, I can increment this counter by saying count equals count plus 1. So it starts at 0. Notice we initialized it to 0. The first time through, 0 plus 1 is 1, and that becomes the new value of count. Once it's 1, 1 plus 1 is 2. That becomes the new value of count. But a shortcut way to write this, when you want to just add 1 to a number, is to just write count plus plus. So again, this is the same as count equals count plus 1. Also, another way you could write it is actually count plus equals 1, right? You can look up that shortcut as well. All right, now, here's the thing. Let's think about this. When I make a guess, right now, the only messages I have are is correct, too low, or too high. But there's two other possibilities now, or one other. We want to say, if you run out of tries, then instead of saying try again, we need to tell you that. So I'm going to change this message. We're not going to say try again because we're not sure that we're going to get another try. So we're going to do that. And after I have incremented this count, this is where it's a possibility that the game is over. If I've incremented this and this is now equal to max tries, which is 10, then the game should be over. If I have not already guessed the number correctly, right? So I need a signal as to whether or not I have made a correct guess. So oftentimes you have to think about using additional variables. So I am going to use this variable. Notice how I named it. I named it game over. It's going to be a Boolean variable, which means I'm only going to set it to true or false. And you name these variables kind of based on how you're going to set the values. So game over equals false means the game is not over yet. That's why we initialize it to false. But if I guess correctly, then I want to signal that the game that I won, right? Signal that I won. So I am going to assign game over equals true. Okay. Now the reason this is important is because here, where I'm getting ready to check, I need to check if I am out of tries. Because if I have just done my 10th guess, then the game is over if this guess was not correct. So that's why I need this signal to check. So we are going to have an if statement here with two conditions that need to be checked. So if count is equal to 10 or max tries, is that what I named this variable? Yes. If count is equal to max tries, and remember our Boolean operator, and it is not game over. So, and game over is equal to false, right? If game over is false, that means I have not selected, I have not picked a correct number. So if game over is false, still false, and once I've incremented this counter, I have reached the maximum number, then I'm going to change this message to be, notice I haven't displayed the message on the page yet. That's why I'm using a variable. I'm going to say, sorry, out of turns. And let's tell me what the number was. The number was, and we can put in picked number. Okay. Now, then this message gets displayed on the page. Okay, so I think that's all we need to do. So let's go back over and think through what we did. We have this, we have max tries, we have our counter gets initialized to 0, game over gets initialized to false. If I pick the right number, then I'm going to signal that the game is over. Otherwise, we're going to, maybe I get this too low or too high. I increment this counter. If I've reached the limit and I haven't picked the number correctly on this try, then I get this message. All right, let's test. So I want to, as a matter of fact, to make the testing easier, I'm going to change max tries to 5. Okay, I just don't want to have to do 10 before I can tell. So that makes it very easy for me to change the game. Okay, so let's put in 50, too low. I'm going to purposely go in the wrong direction. So 51, so that's 2 tries. This is 3 tries. This is 4 tries. This is my 5th try, and I don't get any more. My 5th try was wrong, and so now you tell me what the correct number was. So it seems like that worked. Let's just test it one more time just to make sure. I'm just going to put in whatever. And look, I can even to check it, because right now we're not checking that you're not doing a duplicate guess. So a quick way to check this is just click this button. That was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5th time I get the message. So it looks like that works. Now, what really needs to happen at this point, I want to start a new game, right? Or I might want to. And right now, to start a new game, I need to refresh the page. But why don't I have a button that I can click to restart the game? Okay, so let's add a button here on the page. And I've given this button an ID of start, and it has new game on it. First, let's just make sure the button displays properly. Okay. Now, what needs to happen is once I actually don't want this button to always be visible. I want to control when the user gets to click this. So once I click this new game button, there are a number of things I need to do to start the game, right? So we are going to add a second function to our code here. And this function is going to be called new game. And I'm going to just put a console log to check it. Now remember, we have to connect this function to that button. So here at the very top, I need document get element by ID start dot add event listener. If you click it, I want to go to new game. Let's just check that that works. Okay. I need to save. When I click the, I have an error message. Oh, I have a typo. It says event listened, not listener. Right? So this is a typo. Fix that. Very common thing to happen. When I click this button, it says new game. Okay. Now, what else needs to happen? Actually, a few things, but let's just take it step by step. Once I click that button, I want that button to be grayed out so that I can't start a new game in the middle of a game. So in order to do that, we can disable a button, right? So here in this function, I'm going to select that button, document get element by ID start dot disabled. That is a property that's associated with that, and you have to look that up because it's a little goofy. You might think that the property would be called enabled, but the property is called disabled, and if I set it disabled to true, then that should gray out this button. Okay, let's test it. Again, notice how I'm picking one thing at a time that I'm focusing on, writing that code, and then testing that and only that. All right, so when I click this button, you see the button got grayed out. Later on, when we want to show it again, we will set disabled equal to false. Okay. Now, what needs to happen when I restart a game or when I start a game from the very beginning? I need to pick a number and I need to reset my variables. All right. So let's look at what we did the very first time for this game. So we want to generate this number. So basically all of this, I'm going to take this code, although I have to modify it a little bit, but I'm going to copy. These are all our things that happened at the very beginning, right? I'm going to copy that and bring that down here. But I want the variables to be created here. So at the top, I just want to declare my variables. So I'm going to say let picked number equals 0. We're going to get rid of all this other stuff, right? It's upset now because it doesn't want me to create it twice. I'm going to say my max tries can stay here. We're not going to want to put that down here in this function. So let me take that out because that only gets assigned one time, right? We've got let count equals 0, let game over equals false. So that's fine. All these variables get created at the very beginning. Anytime I start a new game, I need to generate this number, and we're not going to use let here. We just need to assign a number to that variable, okay? So you create it one time at the very beginning. Here is where it gets assigned a value. Again, for count, we don't want to recreate it. We just want to reset it to 0, right? Each time we come back with a new game, this counter has to be reset to 0, and this game over variable has to be reset to false. So this is all my startup stuff that happens when a game starts, right? So at the very beginning here, after we do this, I need to call function to start the game. So this function, the very first time, we're just going to start it, right? So the user doesn't have to click the button the very first time. So we're just going to call this new game function, and when I call it, I have to use these empty parentheses. We'll have a future lesson that really speaks a lot about functions, but right now I'm just kind of guiding you guys into some of these principles, right? Let's see if this works. Okay, so look, this new game function got called, which is why I don't see this button to start, which is fine. Let's see if we are in a game. Okay, and I think my tries is 5 right now, so let's see if I can guess this within 5 tries. So 50 was too high, 30, 40, I don't know if I'm going to get it in 5 tries. There you go. So that was 4 tries, and it worked, right? But there's one more thing here, right? And I'm going to try to go ahead and finish this up, even though this video has gotten a little long. Once the game is over, I need this button to come back, right? So after we display this message on the page, we need to check and see if we need to re-enable that button. And we need to do that, but we don't want to do it until, well, let's try something. If I only want to do it one time, here's what I would do. Now we'll put it in 2 places. So here we need to re-enable new game button. Right? Now I'm doing this kind of on the fly with you guys because I'm actually a little bit not sure if that's where I want to do it, but let's test and see. So I'm going to copy this line and put it here, but change it to false. And the other place I need to do that is, because remember, if you pick the number correctly, or if you run out of tries, in both of these cases, we need to have that button come back. So let's test. Right, so here is my guess. Too low. Let's try what happens if that's 2, 3, 4, 5. Out of turns. And look, the button came back. So that's exactly what we want to happen, right? We might want to do something with this check guess button as well. You guys could add that in terms of thinking about when to enable that or not. Let me give myself 10 turns and let's just double check that it works fine as long as I guess the number within 10 tries. So here's my first game, right? 50 is too high. 2, 3, 4, what is it? 5, that's too low. 6, 7, 8. Oh, am I going to get it? There you go. 9 tries is correct, and the button was enabled again. Okay, so we've added a new feature here, which is a couple things actually, to limit the number of guesses and to be able to restart a new game from here. Okay, by adding in some more variables, creating a function, which is all the work that needs to happen every time you start a new game. That function gets called initially here when the JavaScript file just starts up. So any code that happens here outside of this function happens whenever the file starts up. Whenever this happens and it calls your JavaScript file, then all that code happens. The rest of the functions here, they only execute when called upon, right? And we added just a little bit of logic in here to take care of when to enable that button and to take care of checking when the game is over. All right, good job.